So Chris Cuomo, CNN host, offered up one of the worst takes of the election so far. He's going to display a very prominent centrist bias, a pro-status quo bias. I don't even think he does. He has no idea that that's what he's doing here, but that's certainly what he's doing. Take a look.
And the dense and hyper-ambitious M4A, Medicare for All talk, seems to miss the state of play. It's like working on pretty footwork and your style when your opponent is standing there with a shotgun. Remember, this is a big part of why Trump won in 2016.
Hillary, rotten Clinton. Rotten Clinton.
Little Marco.
Lion Ted Cruz, low energy Jeb Bush. Crooked Hillary Clinton. Crazy Bernie.
Insults, not insights. Simple, not sophisticated. Look, Bloomberg getting in suggests not so much that he thinks he could win. I don't know where he's getting that from, but that this field can't. His top advisor said, Mike is increasingly concerned that the current field of candidates is not well positioned to defeat Trump. The Democratic nominee has to be properly armed for the onslaught that's coming. What does that mean? You've got to answer. Question number 2. Are you speaking the language that America wants to hear right now? No offense, but again, this dense talk and sophisticated policy plans of $1 trillion here and $1 trillion there in 3 years versus 5, and I'm going to take your health care. This is about not being the rabid right. Do you do that if you are seen as an equal opposite of radical left? Single payer or not? Medicare for all versus Medicare for all who want it. This is dense in times of determined simplicity. The Democratic governor-elect, okay, promised to protect Obamacare and the Medicaid expansion. Kentucky kept it simple, okay? He spoke the language of the local people, targeted. Many of the Democratic candidates are talking about blowing up the entire system. To many, it sounds equally as crazy as what they're getting from Trump.
No, to you, it sounds equally crazy as to what they're getting from Trump. To you, it sounds that way. To you and your friends in your high-income little clique, your elite little clique, which is quite different from average people. To you guys, you think, wow, horseshoe theory is definitely true, and the far left and the far right are equally crazy and equally wrong. That is not an opinion held by most people. How do I know that? The polls. The polls are crystal clear on it. Poll Donald Trump's policy ideas on their own. Abysmally unpopular. Abysmal. His healthcare plan had like a 13% approval rating. I think his tax plan is in the 20s. So compare that to what Bernie Sanders is running on. It's not even close. Bernie Sanders blows it out of the water. He's got strong majorities for almost every single thing he's running on. So what he's doing here is he's projecting onto the American people what he thinks. And he's really showing his true colors here. So the first point I want to make is, I mean, he obviously thinks that his commentary here is like genius, when in all seriousness, it's like high school freshman level analysis. You know what, bro? What if, like, the far right and the far left were, like, equally bad, bro? What about that? You think this is, like, an original thought? Oh, God, it's so silly. Now, one area I agree with him is where he talks about simplicity. He's like, you got to keep it simple, man. But he's not acknowledging, and he doesn't realize that Medicare for All is simple. What the left is running on is incredibly simple and powerful. Medicare for All, free college, living wage, end the wars, Green New Deal, legalize marijuana, end the drug war. All of these ideas are incredibly simple. I could sum them up in a soundbite like I just did. Those are simple ideas. In fact, the thing that is not simple, it's that centrist ideology that Mayor Pete and Amy Klobuchar are trying to rep. It's not simple to go out there and say, my college plan involves means testing where everybody over the line of $85,000 per year, when you account for inflation and you make sure people are like, if you're talking about means testing, if you're talking about, non-universal programs, that's the overly wonky, not simplistic stuff. Centrism is the overly wonky, non-simplistic stuff. Corporatism is the overly wonky, non-simplistic stuff. It's very simple to say everybody gets healthcare, free at the point of service. That's super simple. So he's right about the simplicity thing. He's wrong about thinking that the left is not representing the simple solutions. Then he goes on to say, Michael Bloomberg's jumping in the race because he thinks that, this current field can't beat Trump. Maybe Michael Bloomberg is a moron. Have you considered that? The fact that he has billions of dollars doesn't mean that he's right in his political analysis. I mean, we went over it earlier today, but bottom line is, man, he used to be a Republican, then he became an independent, now he's a Democrat. He mocks free healthcare as a pony. He says legalizing weed is the stupidest thing anybody has ever done. That's a policy position that polls at about 65% popularity. He's against increasing the minimum wage. That's an 80% popular position to raise the minimum wage. He's against it. He's with the 20%. He's for stop and frisk. He famously banned big gulps, which is a deeply unpopular position. So maybe he has no idea what the hell he's doing and what he's talking about. Maybe he's actually incredibly unpopular. Maybe that, Cuomo. But no, he just assumes he's a billionaire and he's jumping in the race. He has to have insight, and his insight is these people can't beat Trump. Well, let's see. Bernie Sanders is in a solid second place with a large movement behind him. And Michael Bloomberg is at negative 8%. So I wonder who's got more wisdom into how to beat Trump. And then another important thing and it's a story nobody talks about, and that drives me crazy because they need to, because it really shows the dynamics of what's potent and what works. But Trump, behind closed doors, admits there's one thing he's scared of running against. There's one thing he's like, wow, that's a tough one to beat. It's debt forgiveness. Medical debt forgiveness, student loan debt forgiveness. And he's privately said to people, this socialism thing is not as easy to beat. I mean, you guys are getting overconfident. You guys are too cocky dealing with the socialism thing. That's an idea that sells itself, debt forgiveness. Now, why? Why did he realize that? Well, probably because debt forgiveness is one thing. He's gone bankrupt 6 times. So, if there's one thing Donald Trump understands the appeal of, it's like, oh my God, owing a tremendous amount of money and then not owing a tremendous amount of money, it's like, oh wow, that was a giant burden off my shoulders. So he knows that that's an idea that's appealing. So when he admits that behind closed doors, and you have clowns like Cuomo going out there like, don't go far left, because if you go far left, then that's going to help Trump. What are you basing that off of? I mean, guys, hello. If only we could run some sort of experiment where we run a centrist against Donald Trump and see what happens. We did. It was Hillary Clinton, and she got obliterated. By the way, John Kerry ran against George W. Bush, ran as a centrist, lost. Al Gore ran as a centrist, lost, even though he won the popular vote. Hillary won the popular vote too, but still, lost the Electoral College. So, we've run this experiment, and we haven't had a strong lefty, arguably since FDR. And FDR kept getting reelected and died in office. And Republicans were like, we need term limits because we can't beat strong lefties. So it's just sad to watch. Everything that he says there is biased towards the status quo, biased towards centrism. And the funny thing is, he argues at one point, all you have to do is just not be the extreme right. This is like a Bill Maher type argument that he's been making now. Just don't be Trump and you can win. Except that's the thing. That was always the plan of the Democrats, is just be man, he's really bad, isn't he? But that didn't work. And it didn't work because you can't run on what you're against. You have to run on what you're for. And the sense people got from Hillary is, okay, her whole thing is he's crazy, I'm not. But what are you for? When Donald Trump is going to the Rust Belt in the weeks leading up to the election and hammering Hillary for NAFTA, hammering Hillary for TPP, saying he's going to bring the jobs back, he's going to take on the swamp, he's going to drain the swamp, and she's got nothing to say other than, I'm not that guy, well, it's no wonder that she lost. And his advice is, go back to that same playbook that didn't work. So it's the kind of analysis only somebody who's very comfortable in that CNN elite bubble can make. Because out there in the real world, people got problems. and the problems need to be addressed. Whether it's credit card debt, medical debt, student loan debt, not having health care. I mean, people are struggling. Wages are still stagnant, going all the way back to the 1980s. And his argument is don't rock the boat too much and don't come off as an equal opposite crazy person. But the horseshoe theory is not true. And in fact, the way that you oppose Trump is to actually oppose Trump. He gets too caught up in like stylistic stuff, like Trump is loud and Bernie's loud, therefore they're the same, except people aren't dogs and they can differentiate between like the substance of what both are saying. So obviously Chris Cuomo's dead wrong here, and he has nothing but disdain for working people with his very superficial analysis.